Welcome to the Son of the Eternal Will podcast. I'm your host, Francis Jardine. Today's topic, finding joy in suffering in the divine will, is very important in our times. There is no doubt that so many people are suffering. I think all of us are either suffering or have a loved one who is suffering, perhaps even a very heavy cross. Even though, as human beings, we are fearful of suffering or crosses, Jesus shared with the servant of God, Luisa Picaretta, how beautiful suffering is, especially when suffered in the divine will. This will be the first of 7 episodes, which will explain why we should find joy in suffering. And there isn't a better way, at least I can't think of any, of doing this through the 7 sorrows of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and how Jesus explains how we can also participate in her 7 sorrows. Why is it important to look at suffering in the light of Our Lady's sorrows? Because she surpassed in suffering all creatures together. So we read from the Gospel of Luke. This child is destined for the falling and the rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be opposed, so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too. It is said that the piercing of Mother Mary's soul included all the sorrows and all the sufferings that she would experience in her life. Imagine what you might feel if someone predicted your suffering, or the suffering or cross of your own child, or even someone you loved very much. Mama Mary shows us how to handle this. After she heard the prophecy of Simeon, Mama Mary tells us, "Each word was a sharp sword that pierced me. But what pierced my heart the most was to hear that this celestial infant would be not only the salvation, but also the ruin of many and the target of contradictions. What pain, what sorrow! If the divine will had not sustained me, I would have died instantly of pure pain. But it gave me life to begin to form in me the kingdom of sorrows within the kingdom of its very divine will. So with the right of mother, which I had over all, I acquired also the right of mother and queen of all sorrows." This is so important to us because if we are having a cross or a suffering, we can always go to our mother, mother and queen of all sorrows. She will be there to help us. And imitating Our Lady, what did she do? Possessing the divine will, she continued to allow the divine will to sustain her in hearing her son's sufferings presented this way. So we too need to ask the divine will to sustain us in every suffering that we will endure. Continuing in day 23, there is a special insight we learn from the writings. Mama Mary tells us, "Now, my child, you must know that in the light of the divine will, I already knew all the sorrows I was to suffer, and even more than that which the holy prophet told me. But in that act so solemn of offering my son, and hearing it being repeated to me, I felt so pierced that my heart bled, and deep gashes opened in my soul." So Our Lady, in the light of the divine will, knew all the sorrows she was to suffer. In this first sorrow, we see how suffering, seeing someone else suffer, can sometimes be harder than if we were suffering ourselves. And maybe this has happened in your life, but I remember a time when I was very sick, and my mother said that she would prefer that she was the one suffering rather than me. This is a beautiful sign of maternal love. willing to suffer and even die for their children. So where is the joy in all this? Earlier in day 23, we hear Mama Mary explaining the life in the grotto with her son Jesus. Because of the presence of the divine infant and of the divine will operating in us, that little grotto had changed into paradise. It is true that pains and tears were not lacking, but compared to the immense seas of joy, of happiness, of light, which the divine fiat made arise in each of our acts, they were just little drops plunged into these seas. And then the sweet and lovable presence of my dear son was one of my greatest happinesses. Where do we find true happiness then? In God's divine will. Mama Mary says just by being in Jesus' presence, she experienced her greatest happiness. Jesus is always with us, inside and outside of us. If we are aware of this, how much peace and happiness will we experience? Furthermore, Jesus says this about sorrows that he and his mama experienced on this earth. Daughter of my will, why do you want to trouble your peace and your happiness? Know that where my will reigns, it is like a noble divine queen. It possesses immense joys and happinesses without end. Sorrow, tears, bitternesses are born in time, all births of the human will. They are not born in eternity, nor are they births from it. They are limited and finite. Therefore, they do not have the power to enter, even slightly, into the sea of the happinesses of my divine volition. He says, this is the divine way, and in this state did the Queen of Heaven and my very humanity find themselves. All our sorrows, and they were so many and of all kinds, could not decrease nor penetrate into the summit of our endless joys and happinesses. This is so powerful. We have learned that there is no disturbance and that there is always peace in the divine will. We see Jesus is saying, even though we may have sorrows and crosses, if we possess the divine will, these pains will not decrease our joys and our happinesses, even here on earth. So, does Jesus give us an idea of how we too can participate in the 7 sorrows of Our Lady? Yes. In volume 6, he tells us, one who in advance places herself in the hands of Providence, offering herself to suffer any kind of pains, miseries, illnesses, calumnies, and everything which the Lord will dispose upon her, comes to participate in the first sorrow of the prophecy of Simeon. We as Catholics also see that our lives will be mixed with joys and sorrows. Jesus is telling us that, like Mama Mary, if we abandon ourselves in the divine providence, offering all our sufferings and everything God disposes in our lives, we too can participate in the first sorrow of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And how does Our Lady tell us to do this? She says again in day 23, now listen to your mama in your pains, in the sorrowful encounters which are not lacking for you either, when you know that the divine will want some sacrifice of you. Be ready. Do not lose heart, but rather repeat quickly the dear and sweet fiat, that is, whatever you want, I want. And with heroic love, let the divine will take its royal place in your pains, that it may convert them for you into little coins of infinite value, with which you will be able to pay the debts of your brothers, to ransom them from the slavery of the human will, so as to make them enter again as free children into the kingdom of the divine fiat. We've learned in the writings that one of the ways we can glorify God more than the souls in heaven is that we can offer our sufferings. The souls in heaven, their merits are fixed. They cannot suffer anymore. But we pilgrim souls can. And so we could still glorify God through our pains and sufferings and crosses. And they will give new births to souls to live in the divine will. This should also be a joy for us, that we are participating in this. So let's summarize some key points. This world will not be lacking in suffering. We see that. It's all around us. We learn we need to go to our mother for help. The Queen of all sorrows. She is there to assist us as she was there for her son. Call the divine will with heroic love in all our pains to ransom our brothers and sisters. Jesus is looking for generous souls that are willing to forget about ourselves and just focus on loving Him and His will. This is the heroic love. And then know that the joy and happiness we receive in the divine will eclipses the sufferings and pains we will have here on earth, both our own sufferings and those around us, our loved ones that are suffering. So now we would like to let you listen to a sharing of someone who has applied these truths of the divine will in the circumstance she was facing in seeing her sister suffer. You will see that even though the anonymous person who is sharing her testimony is not the one sick, like the Blessed Mother in the prophecy of Simeon, she must abandon herself to God's will and offer her acts for her sister. We thank our anonymous contributor for sharing her experience and being a witness to how to abandon all things to God's divine will, and helping us learn how to take possession of this first sorrow of the Virgin Mary. Lord, we love you in your will.
My youngest sister was confined late last year. She went from apparent good health to someone who required dialysis 3 times a week in the ICU. My head was whirling. What's happening? As we visited her, we saw her poor body, bloated, jaundiced, immobile, and hooked up to many machines. She could not breathe on her own. Succeedingly, we were advised that she could also be suffering from a malignancy in her pancreas. I felt like the punches coming from all over. I requested the little children of the divine will to pray with me. I opened my phone to gaze at the tomb of Mamina Luisa. I told her I would consider it a great debt if she would intercede for my sister to be better. Fused with Jesus, I offered my sufferings for my sister to Jesus and Mama Mary. I told Our Lady that what I felt was just a drop in the ocean of her sufferings while gazing at Jesus on the cross. Won't she receive my little drops in her sea of sorrows, that Jesus may feel my love and compassion for him through his mama? As we waited for further test results, I just felt very exhausted and surrendered everything to the divine will. So, this is what it means to be a nothing and to truly abandon everything to Jesus. Our helplessness, our finances, our sorrows, the life of my sister, etc. What Jesus imprinted in my mind is his absolute love and perfect will for my sister. That was enough. After 1 month in the hospital, very weak and immobile, my sister was discharged. She had to undergo one final test to determine the state of her pancreatic tumor. The night before her procedure, the divine will gave me these 2 words. Ask me. I told him I ask only for his divine will. Here is the sum total of his love for my sister and us all. No greater gift could I give to my sister but his will. I finally stopped telling Jesus what to do. In the final test, my sister was cleared of all malignancy. I did each act in thanksgiving to counter the waves of ingratitude received by the Lord. It is true that in the divine will, we possess everything. Would I say this if the result was different? By God's grace, yes, because his will is perfect and holy.